take it away. Maybe do a little bit of a introduce yourself and INTP. And
Sure.
well,
First of all, I have to say I'm very happy to be part of the process of this conference. I'm very sorry that I couldn't join more integrally because the little I could catch is fantastic. I think it's really very interesting to be doing this. And so with Pavel, we had the pleasure of working on a sort of yes, science as meditation retreats in a sort of scientific monastery that we're creating as a nonprofit in the Pyrenees. And I guess, should I go to the conceptual things?
yeah, yeah, that sounds good. I put a link into
Actually, yeah, let me allow me to correct it.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, there you go. If you're interested in the center. Yeah, and Matthew was actually also helping to organize this conference, at least in the beginning. When
More in the beginning, I would say that's
we started planning it together, and then he had to drop off for a retreat he is running right now. So he managed to still join for a little bit, but yeah, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. All right, let's see. We can make this work. Can I make this work? Yes. Mhm. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity to talk about this in such a context. This is personal work that I find very interesting, and I don't know if it will be interesting for anyone else, but I think, who knows, it's worth sharing in such a context, such a, I guess, positive and compassionate context. I will start with saying that this is probably a book that will frustrate anyone, or because I promise to be too fast on the premises and too shallow on the depths. That's, I guess, the the name of the game with 12 minutes in front of me. Um, but I hope that it can somehow kickstart a discussion. And so basically, the place where I'm starting from is a feeling I've had over years of working in linguistics and physics and now ecology, being a bit confused about my field. That's at the end of the day, for a single object, I think people should not be too surprised by this statement here in this specific audience, but the same object can be explained and understood from very different directions. And one example I like to take is the example of linguistics, because those various directions are very explicitly different subfields of linguistics. So if I think of one instance of a word or of a sound sequence, say the sound sequence cat, I can ask myself, okay, I can explain it from what it is made of. That what frequencies make up the word cat, and that's the field of phonetics, and then we go towards physics and the like. We can also ask ourselves, why is the word cat used to mean a cat? And that has nothing to do with what the word cat is made of. Practically speaking, there's nothing in the sounds of cat that convey the meaning cat. That's almost always true in language, not completely. Oops, sorry. But still, it's a strong tendency of language to do that. So since it's not in the components at all, and it's not in the context either, I'll go there after that. The only explanation we can have for why cat means cat is through its history. Cat comes from kata in Proto-Germanic, that comes from katus in Proto-Indo-European. And it's just a sequence of accidents that have happened to shape this very specific trajectory. And then there is context, which is what role does the word cat, what specific instance of the word cat, play in a given sentence? And what I like about this example, which may seem maybe a bit trivial after the much deeper thoughts of the previous presentations. But what I think is interesting about this example is it really shows that although this is the same object, an instance of the word cat, we're asking very different questions about it that are not in competition with each other. Each is a valid way of explaining something about this object. And it's, in a sense, not the same object that we're explaining, in fact, because when I'm explaining it through composition, I'm looking at, I'm putting it in the class of equivalence that includes all the things that sound like cat, like let's say the start of catalog or catastrophe, maybe, if you're pushing it a bit. Whereas if I'm looking at this, it's etymology. I'm putting it in relation with cats in German and chat in French and gâteau and so on and so forth, which could sound very different, be used in lots of other places, but share a history, are related through their history. And when I use it in this contextual explanation, I'm not saying anything about the word cat itself. In fact, I'm just saying what can take this spot in the sentence. What is the role of this hole that would be left if you removed cat from the sentence? What could fill this hole? And so far, I think, yes, so good, maybe not so surprising, but um, I think it's interesting because one of the things uh, that really struck me thinking through those things is that for a lot of the history of science, those three modes of explaining were roughly equal in depth, in refinement, in power. And then at some point, there was a mathematization, a formalization of science. And I would say that uh, in most ways, the upward type of explanation, the compositional one, what are you made of, has clearly won the math race, right? It has a lot of power, it's very seductive, very attractive because you use the same explanatory schemas or schemata and tools across very different fields. Somehow you can use combinatorics or differential equations from physics to computer science to economics. It allows, therefore, formal analogies between fields. Somehow, if you find the same equation or the same combinatorial properties in biology or economics, you can transfer ideas across very different parts of the universe. And that makes it extremely powerful. And it produces, maybe therefore, or maybe that's another property of it, it produces technical explanations that are both generalizable and precise. They can be tuned to represent different phenomena in different ways. I would note, by the way, that we all, I think, care about emergence here. As far as I'm concerned, emergence is still upward. It's still from parts to whole, right? The simple thing in emergence is still the parts, or something about the parts. That's the starting point. It's just that there is non-trivial upward movement. There's something very interesting that happens in that upward movement from parts to whole. But it's still part of this corpus. If, on the other hand, I focus on downward explanation, so the explanation from context to the objects, which is, I think, what I want to talk about now, today. Downwards explanations are in some sense more intuitive in many complex systems, asking about the role or the function of an organ, of a word, of an artifact, or the piece, like some piece of an artifact, seems more intuitively important than what they're made of. Um, I think that points at the generality of this way of thinking is that across very different fields, you have the same empirical tools. What you will do, whether in biology or linguistics or engineering, is you delete a part or you substitute a part for another, and you see what effects it has on the whole. So your explanation, the test is on the whole. Is the organism still alive? If I remove the heart, if I replace it by a pump, is the sentence still grammatical if I replace cat by dog? And so the fact that this basic principle holds across so many different fields would give the hope that maybe there is some kind of formal analogies, abstract language that could be built for this. But as far as I can tell, in my experience, we do not really have a technical language that would allow precise formal analogies between the role of a gene in a bacteria and the role of a word in a sentence or the role of an institution in a society, right? This seems very, if we try to make an analogy like this, it sounds like poetry. rather than the kind of analogies that we can make between light and sound or between the nucleus of an atom and a neutron star. So could we somehow have a language to make those analogies equally precise? There is one candidate in physics, so I apologize for people who are not who are a bit reticent to physics. I think it's acceptable. But for those who are not, I just wanted to point out that this very same phenomenon, which is explaining something about the trajectory of light that, let's say, is emitted in the air and perceived at some point inside water. There are two very different ways of explaining something about this trajectory. One is the upward or compositional explanation. You say every point of space is like a small source of light when it is activated, like it receives a wave and then it re-emits that wave. And if you sum all the points in space, then the interference of all those waves creates the trajectory of light that you see, that has this bend going from the air into water. And that's Huygens principle. And then there's Fermat's principle, which says if you know that it started at A and arrives at B, light always takes the route that takes the shortest time. And since it is faster in the air than in water, the shortest path is not straight line. It is actually having a bend at point P. So here you start from a condition on the whole, taking the fastest route as a whole from A to B. And from that, you explain something about the part, the fact that here at P there is a bend. So that type of explanation is a kind of downward explanation from whole to part. What I would note is that you find these kind of principles, you find them throughout physics. In fact, there is a very deep equivalence throughout physics between this upward vision and this downward vision, which in my experience makes physicists much less reticent about teleology than biologists. They're much less afraid of it or much less, scared by it. But still, even in physics, it feels strange and non-causal because we know that, I mean, we assume that light is not choosing somehow to take the shortest path. It doesn't have the power to choose. So how to understand that, right? It's an as if story. Maybe it does, who knows? But at least we like to think that it doesn't. More importantly for me, it is not fully downward. Why? Because what is being optimized, the time spent getting from A to B, it is still defined as a composition of the part. It's still the sum of all the times taken, all the durations of all the sub-intervals. So even though you're explaining the whole from the part, you're using a property of the whole that is the sum of a property of parts. And I would like to point to the difference with Darwinian selection, where you explain, when you do Darwinism, you explain an organ or a behavior by how it plays into the fitness of the organism. But the fitness of the organism is its number of descendants. It's not the sum of the fitnesses of the organs that make it up. So it's really a property of the whole that is has explanatory power. So I would say that my goal in life is to escape this attractor of compositional explanations. Could there be an abstract language unifying or allowing transfers between many sciences of purposive or functional role-based explanation? And I will, stop very shortly because my time is almost over. But I'll just give a set of rules that I've tried to use to start this endeavor, and I will stop where the endeavor starts. The first rule is if you're trying to explain something about an object P that is a part of something else, you should try to find explanations that do not require knowing what is inside of P, what it is made of, how it's implemented. Just ignore that. P is a black box. The heart is a pump in the body. You can say that even though you have no idea what the heart is made of. You should reject explanations of P that remain meaningful when P is taken out of its context C. If you take a heart and you put it in the vacuum of space or in the lab, anything that you can still say about the heart would not be part of this downward type of explanation. It should be forbidden at least as a starting point in my language. Even more tricky, I should reject any explanation of a part from its context that requires to know what the context is fully made of. If I need to know all the parts of the context, For instance, if I explain a gene by its role in a gene network, but I cannot do that without having mapped out the whole gene network, all the genes in there and all their interactions. Actually, what I'm doing is not explaining the part, I'm just explaining the whole gene network from its parts. So I'm still in the upward direction mostly. Like it's still the dominant direction. And finally, and that's the hardest thing, is let's not try to, I mean, I would like to not try to tackle the brain before I have tackled somehow the pendulum, the oscillator, the harmonic oscillator, the simplest version of the problem. So the whole game is finding the simplest version. And so where the technicalities start and I stop is in the upward mode worlds, the starting point is I have balls and springs and walls. And with just that, somehow, with the combinatorics of those things, I generate mechanics, solid and fluid mechanics, I generate chemistry. And what would be the equivalent in the downward world? For me, it would be generating diverse roles in biology, in linguistics, in engineering, and games as an interplay of the equivalent of the balls and the springs would be context and selection forces. Like a part's role would be defined by how it belongs to multiple wholes. Like this verb belongs to this hole, but also that hole is nested in another hole. It is nested in a different hole. There are tensions between them. Or this move is part of two contexts, the black player and the white player. They oppose each other. And through this topology of selective forces, of being part of multiple wholes at the same time, I could define uniquely what it means to play a role and to have a different role or a similar role across fields or within the field. And here I stop. And so I hope that everybody is as frustrated as I was expecting. And thank you. Sorry, I took a bit longer than expected.
Thank you. Do we have a question real quick? Nice. And I always have lots of questions about this. Something that struck me as kind of curious is about this. Does the light beam have a free will? Which seems like we have a thought of like there's a causal influence of something in the light beam, and right, because that's like what is free will? If we ask the question of does the light beam have free will, the question is what is free will, and is that free will, whatever causes the light to bend, is that substantively different from that which causes me to, move my arm, right? And is there a way to, I don't know, compare those? I don't know if you have thoughts.
Yeah, honestly, I would be happy to just accept that maybe we can take light as a very simple agent, and that's a fair way of thinking about the world. Why not?
Does that does that touch on John Wheeler's It from Bit
Ah,
and the participatory universe of the observer and the light path?
I don't know. You
I'm
tell me.
curious. I'm curious.
You tell me.
It from,
Neil?
you were saying?
John Wheeler did experiments decades back here at
Mhm.
UT Austin
Mhm.
um, with light paths, and I would have to go read a bit more to give a cogent explanation here. But for example, looking out across the cosmos, the moment we observe a star in another galaxy through a telescope, its light path is calculated at the moment of observation.
Mhm.
I have yeah, no stance on this. I think
Yeah.
Neil, you were asking something while I think about that question.
It might be time pressed, so
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually touches on what Diesel was saying. And from my perspective that I did with the meditation, whenever this is the fundamental problem with quantum mechanics is observation and reality are tied together if you believe Wheeler and Bohr and Heisenberg, etc. Um, from a complexity standpoint, it's a seamless universe in which there is light and there is us and there's no separation. And at the same time, there's the scale of the experiment. And those two things are both true. The way light is both waves and particles, the way the upward view and the downward view are also both true, depending on everything is perspective dependent. Which brings us back to the contemplation aspect, I think.
It's all the
Yeah.
tensions and the dualities.
Yeah. And you have to hold all of them at the same time as you recognize you'll only see one at a time. It's worth
Yeah.
looking for every single one, but you
Yeah.
also have to hold all of them.
Maybe I guess the one thing I want to say about this is the most beautiful thing, or maybe the most beautiful thing I learned in physics, and is from the perspective of light, time does not exist. So
Right.
all of the universe is just a static garden. And I think the fact that we can think about the perspective of light in this way through physics is one of the most beautiful things there is.
I agree.
But
Yeah.
also space does not exist, so there's no garden.
In the
Um,
non-dual realm, there is no space and there is no time.
before
There's no
we
eternity and there's no distance.
before people start tuning out because people need to go, I just want to say a few words to wrap up. First, some logistical things. So please upload your the recordings to the shared Google Drive link. Um, Also, all the recordings that we were streaming to YouTube are going to be on the channel. So I sent the message yesterday with all the links. Some of the links were updated because, yeah, a few of them were changed. So I just uploaded in the chat the new document. You can also find it on the event page, the Lume event page. If you scroll down, all the messages that were sent are going to be there, and all the links in those are updated. So, yeah, so in this PDF that I just attached, you should have all the right links. And yeah, so please upload the thing, see the YouTube videos. And I feel like there's probably more stuff that I'm forgetting, but anything else? Logistics? Any questions or anything I
I
might be
just have a
forgetting?
question about the format for the timing for the discussion round two tomorrow.
Yep. Yep.
So 11:05 to 35. So it'll be similar format to the hour we just had, where there's about 10 minutes. And
No, discussions are going to be breakout rooms so each person gets a third of the group and
okay,
30
that
minutes.
makes more sense because I thought it was 25 minutes. So
Yeah, it is. It
got it.
is.
Okay,
Those are 25 minutes. Yeah. Um,
great.
and yeah, okay. So there is a members directory. So if you want to be in touch, it's also linked in the thing. Also, currently, basically, there is an editable whatever Google Sheet thing where you can update your information, your name, your whatever is wrong there. And there is a more nicely formatted kind of database on the website. So yeah, please, basically the information there is partly AI generated because some of it we were collecting in registration form and the rest I just got AI to look you up and generate the rest. So yeah, please check if the information is correct, update it in the Google Sheet, and then after the conference, a few days from now, we'll manually update the nicely formatted page. So you're not going to see the changes reflect immediately. So that's one thing. Another thing is we do have the platform where the directory is it's currently not up on Google, but it is mostly kind of built. So it's a website. We have a website for this community exclusively. I just linked it in the chat. Also, maybe I'll send an email later today with some of these links again, just to remind you. But you can, yeah, feel free to look at it, browse. It's also partly AI generated, the world we live in these days. But some of the documents, some of the links that I've been sending before the conference are up there, and readings, things like that. And yeah, so hopefully that can be a hub that we can all keep in touch and use in useful ways after the conference. It also has databases for in registration. We collected funding sources, what journals are you aware of, what research centers. So all of that has been again enhanced by AI, researched and put into databases there. So you can find those pages. I'm quite impressed with the sort of result that it did. Also not 100% accurate probably, but Anyway, so it kind of maps out the ecosystem of this complexity contemplation space and gives us a